I want to tell you a story. It is not about a superhero. It is about a normal person, just like you and me. His name was David. He was 28 years old. He lived in a small city in the United States. David had a job in an office. He had some friends, and he had a phone full of social media apps. On the surface, his life looked fine, but inside he was not happy. Every morning, David woke up late. He checked his phone first thing. He scrolled. He watched videos. He liked photos. Minutes turned into hours. He told himself, "It's okay. I'll do my work later. I still have time." But later never came. His work was always late. His room was always messy. His goals, the dreams he once had as a teenager, were now just shadows in the back of his mind. He wanted to write a book. He wanted to learn guitar. He wanted to start his own business. But he always thought, maybe tomorrow, not today. Today I am tired. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. And life passed by. One night, David met an old school friend named Tom. Tom looked different. He looked strong, confident, and full of energy. "Wow, Tom," David said, "you've changed. What happened?" Tom smiled. "I stopped wasting time. I stopped waiting for tomorrow. I started doing what I always wanted to do." David laughed nervously. "I wish I could do that too." Tom looked at him seriously. "You can, but first you need to wake up. You need to see how much time you're losing every day." Those words hit David like a punch. That night, when he went home, he could not sleep. He kept thinking, am I really wasting my life? Am I living or just existing? He opened his laptop and found an old folder. Inside, there was a document called My Dreams. It was from when he was 18. In that document, he wrote, write a novel, travel to 3 countries, learn to play guitar, start my own company, build a life that makes me proud. David stared at the words. 10 years had passed, and he had done none of those things. He closed the laptop slowly. His heart was heavy. He whispered to himself, "I don't want to waste another 10 years." That was his wake-up call. The next morning, David woke up early. For the first time in a long time, he did not grab his phone. He just lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. His mind was full of questions. Why do I always delay things? Why do I always say tomorrow? Why not today? He made coffee and sat by the window. The world outside was already moving. People walked fast. Cars honked. A woman ran with her dog. Life was happening. But David, he felt stuck. He remembered how many times he had told himself, "I'll start tomorrow. I'll eat healthy tomorrow. I'll clean my room tomorrow. I'll start writing my book tomorrow. I'll call my parents tomorrow." But tomorrow never really came. It was always one step away, like a horizon you can never touch. That morning, David opened his notebook and wrote, "Why do I wait for tomorrow?" At first, he had no answer. But then he realized something. Waiting for tomorrow gave him comfort. It made him feel safe. If he said, "I'll do it tomorrow," he didn't have to face fear today. He didn't have to risk failure. It was easy, but it was also a trap. Later that day, David met his cousin Sarah. She was a nurse, and she worked long hours at the hospital. Yet she always seemed full of energy. "You look tired," Sarah said when she saw him. "I am," David admitted, "but not because of work. I feel tired of myself." Sarah laughed softly. "What do you mean?" "I always wait for tomorrow. I never do things today. And now I feel like I've lost years." Sarah nodded. "That's the tomorrow trap. I've seen it with many people. They wait, they hope, they plan, but they never act. And one day, they look back and realize their life is half gone. Her words cut deep. David asked, "So how do you escape the trap?" She looked at him directly. "You stop lying to yourself. Tomorrow is just another word for never. If something is important, you do it now. Even a small step counts. But you must take it today." That night, David tried to follow her advice. He sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and wrote one sentence. "This is the beginning of my book." Just one sentence. It was small, almost nothing, but to David it felt like breaking chains. For the first time in years, he had acted, not tomorrow, today. The next morning he felt different, lighter. He made his bed. He cleaned his desk. He wrote another paragraph in his book. He even called his mom. Each action was small, but each one broke a piece of the tomorrow trap. He began to see the truth. Procrastination was not laziness. It was fear. Fear of failure. Fear of discomfort. Fear of change. And the only way to defeat fear was with action. Immediate action. Still, the trap was not easy to escape. A few days later, David fell back into old habits. He stayed up late watching shows. He told himself, "I'll wake up early tomorrow." But he didn't. He woke up late, skipped his writing, and felt guilty again. The trap was always waiting, ready to pull him back. One evening, David met Tom again. "I tried," David said. "I wrote a little. I cleaned my room. But then I messed up again. I keep going back to the old ways." Tom smiled. "Of course. The tomorrow trap is strong. It's like quicksand. You don't escape in one day. You escape step by step. But the rule is always the same. Do something now, even if it's small. Never wait for the perfect time. The perfect time doesn't exist." David thought about that. Maybe the real secret was not to be perfect. Maybe it was just to keep moving, even in small steps. That night, he opened his laptop again. He didn't feel inspired. He didn't feel strong. But he remembered Tom's words, "Do something now." So he wrote another sentence. Then another. Soon he had half a page. He smiled. It wasn't much, but it was more than yesterday. And slowly he began to believe the way out of the tomorrow trap is not to wait for motivation. It is to act, even without it. David didn't know it yet, but this lesson would change his whole life. David was making small changes. He was writing a little each day. He was cleaning his room, waking up earlier, calling his family. It felt good, but something was still wrong. Every weekend, David spent time with his old group of friends. They had been close since high school. They met at the same bar, sat at the same table, and talked about the same things. At first, it felt fun, but after a while, David noticed something. The conversations were always the same. Complaints, gossip, negativity. Work sucks. Life is boring. The system is broken, so why even try? No one talked about dreams or goals. No one tried to grow. They laughed at people who worked hard. They rolled their eyes at anyone with ambition. And every time David left the bar, he felt heavy, tired, and empty. One Saturday night, he told his friends, "I started writing a book." There was silence. Then one of them, Mark, laughed. "A book? Man, nobody reads books anymore. That's a waste of time." Another friend smirked. "What's next? You're going to be the next J.K. Rowling." They all laughed. David forced a smile, but inside it hurt. He thought, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm wasting my time. The next morning, he told Sarah about it. They laughed at me. David said, "Maybe I'm crazy for trying." Sarah shook her head. "No, David, you're not crazy. They are just scared. When people see someone trying to grow, it reminds them of their own wasted potential. So they pull you down, not because you're wrong, but because they don't want to feel left behind." David thought about that all day. He realized his friends were like anchors, heavy, pulling him back into the sea of excuses and wasted time. That week, Tom called him. "Want to grab coffee?" Tom asked. At the cafe, Tom listened to David's story about his friends. Tom nodded. "I know the type. I had friends like that too, but I had to let them go." "Let them go?" David asked. "Yes, because your environment is stronger than your will. If you spend time with people who do nothing, you will do nothing. If you spend time with people who build, you will build." David was silent. He didn't want to lose his friends. They had history, memories, years together, but he also didn't want to stay stuck. That night, David lay in bed, staring at the ceiling again. He remembered the laughter, the mocking voices. He remembered the heavy feeling after every weekend with them. Then he thought of Tom, confident, focused, growing. He whispered to himself, "Who I spend time with is who I become." The next weekend, his friends texted him. "Same place, same time?" David stared at the message. His hand shook a little. He typed back slowly. "Not tonight, guys. I've got something to work on." There was no reply. For the first time, he chose himself. The weekend felt strange. Quiet, lonely, but also free. He opened his laptop and wrote for 2 hours straight. He cleaned his room completely. He even cooked a healthy meal. And for the first time in years, he felt proud of how he spent his Saturday night. The next day, Sarah called him. "What did you do last night?" she asked. "I stayed home," David said with a smile. "I wrote, I cleaned, I cooked. It was peaceful." Sarah laughed. "See? You don't need people who drain you. You need people who lift you." Her words stayed in his mind. A week later, Tom invited David to meet some of his friends. David felt nervous, but he agreed. At the cafe, he met 3 people. Anna, who was learning a new language. James, who was starting a small online business. Lily, who was training for a marathon. The conversation was different. They didn't complain. They didn't mock. They talked about goals, struggles, and small wins. David listened quietly at first. Then he shared, "I'm writing a book." Instead of laughing, Anna smiled. "That's amazing. What's it about?" James nodded. "Writing is tough, but if you stick with it, it's worth it." Lily added, "Every big thing starts small. Keep going." For the first time, David felt understood. He felt supported. That night, walking home, he realized something important. The people around you can either poison your life or water your growth. And he made a decision. He would spend less time with people who pulled him down and more time with people who lifted him up. It wasn't easy. His old friends noticed his distance. Some sent sarcastic messages. Some stopped talking to him completely. But David didn't mind. He finally understood. If you want to change your life, you must change your circle. And with every step away from the toxic company, David felt lighter. He was finally free to grow. David was making progress. He was writing almost every day. He was spending less time with toxic friends. He felt stronger inside. But soon, a new problem appeared. Every morning, David made a long list of things to do. Clean the kitchen. Write for 2 hours. Answer emails. go for a run, read a book, cook dinner, learn guitar. It looked good on paper. But by the end of the day, half the list was undone. David felt frustrated. Why can't I finish my tasks? I try, but I never do everything. One evening, he called Sarah. I don't get it, he said. I make lists. I work hard, but I can't keep up. Sarah smiled through the phone. David, the problem is not your effort. The problem is your priorities. My priorities? Yes. You're trying to do everything at once. But not everything matters equally. You need to decide what is most important. Then give your best energy to that. David was quiet. He had never thought about that before. The next day, David met Tom for lunch. Tom listened and nodded. Sarah is right. Think of your life as a jar, Tom said. If you fill it with sand first, there's no space for big rocks. But if you put the big rocks in first, the sand will still fit around them. David raised an eyebrow. Big rocks. Tom smiled. The big rocks are your most important goals. The small rocks and sand are everything else. If you don't focus on the big rocks first, you'll waste your life on sand. That night, David sat at his desk with a blank sheet of paper. He asked himself, what are my big rocks? Slowly, he wrote, write my book, improve my health, build a better career, spend time with family. That was it. 4 big rocks. He stared at the list. It felt clear, simple, strong. Then he asked himself, what about the other things? Like watching shows, scrolling social media, or gossiping with old friends? He smiled. That's just sand. The next morning, he tested his new idea. Instead of checking his phone, he started with the most important rock, writing. He wrote for 1 hour before work. At lunch, he went for a walk and bought a healthy meal. Another rock, health. In the evening, he called his mom and helped his sister with her homework. Rock number 4, family. For the first time, his day felt full in the right way. Of course, it wasn't perfect. Some days, David still wasted time. Some days, he still got lost in the sand. But now he had a map. Every morning, he asked himself, what are my big rocks today? And slowly, his life began to change. A few weeks later, David was sitting with Tom again. I feel better, David said. When I focus on the big rocks, I actually feel proud of myself at night. Not just busy, but productive. Tom nodded. Exactly. Most people confuse being busy with being productive. But busy just means your time is full. Productive means your time is full of the right things. David smiled. That made sense. One Sunday afternoon, David visited Sarah at her apartment. She was cooking soup while he sat at the table. Sarah, he said, I think I finally understand priorities. It's not about doing everything. It's about choosing the right things. Sarah laughed. Yes, you got it. Life is short, David. You don't have time for everything, but you always have time for what matters most. That night, David wrote a note on his wall. Big rocks first. It was simple, but it became his new rule. A few days later, his old friends invited him again. Come out, man. Just one night. Don't be so serious. David looked at the message. For a moment, he felt tempted, but then he thought, is this a rock or just sand? He smiled, put his phone down, and went back to writing. The days became weeks, and the weeks became months. David was not perfect, but he was moving forward. He was no longer wasting his life on things that didn't matter. He was building his life rock by rock, step by step, and inside, for the first time in many years, he felt hope. Life was slowly changing for David. He was writing almost every day. He was taking better care of his health. He was giving more time to his family. But deep inside, he knew something was still holding him back. One Friday evening, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Mark, one of his old friends. "Hey, we're meeting at the bar tonight. Come on, man, don't disappear on us." David stared at the message. His chest felt heavy. He missed the comfort of that group. The easy laughs, the shared memories, the familiar faces. But then he remembered the negativity, the gossip, the mocking when he said he wanted to write a book. He sat with his phone in his hand for a long time. The next day, David met Tom for coffee. "Tom," he said, "I feel stuck between two worlds. Part of me wants to grow, but part of me doesn't want to lose my old friends." Tom sipped his coffee and nodded. "That's normal. Change always comes with loss. If you climb a mountain, you can't carry everything with you. Some things and some people you have to leave behind." David frowned. "But they're my friends. We've known each other for years." Tom leaned forward. "Ask yourself this. Do they make you better? Do they push you forward, or do they hold you back?" David was silent. He already knew the answer. That night, Sarah called. She had a gentle voice, but her words were clear. "David, sometimes the hardest choice is the right one. You can't move into your future if you're chained to your past." David sat on his bed after the call, staring at the floor. He realized he had to make a decision. The next weekend, Mark texted again. "Where are you, man? We never see you anymore. You're acting too good for us now." David took a deep breath and typed back, "It's not that. I just need to focus on different things right now. I'm working on myself, and I need space." He pressed send. His hands were shaking. Mark replied almost instantly, "Wow, so you're leaving us? Fine, do what you want." David felt a sharp pain in his chest, but at the same time, he felt lighter. He had made his choice. The following days were strange. His phone was quiet. No more group messages, no more late-night calls. At first, he felt lonely, but then he noticed something new. Peace. His evenings were calm. He wrote more. He exercised more. He slept better. It was painful, but it was also freeing. One evening, David walked to the park, thinking about everything. The sky was turning orange with sunset. Families were playing. Joggers were running. Couples were laughing together. David whispered to himself, "Life is too short to spend with people who don't believe in me." He felt a deep truth in those words. Weeks passed. The pain of losing his old friends slowly faded, and the space they left behind was filled with new people. Tom's circle, Sarah's encouragement, and even his own growing strength. One night, Anna invited him to join a study group for people learning new skills. James asked him to brainstorm business ideas. Lily invited him to run a short trail with her. David said yes. And with every new connection, he felt like he was stepping into a brighter world. Still, sometimes, late at night, he thought of Mark and the others. He wondered what they were doing. He wondered if they thought about him. But then he remembered the heaviness he used to feel after every meeting, and he knew he had made the right choice. One Sunday morning, David wrote in his journal, "Growth is painful. Letting go is painful. But nothing is more painful than staying stuck." He closed the notebook and smiled. He was learning something important. To build a new life, you must sometimes burn the bridges to the old one. And even though it hurt, David was ready. He had chosen his future over his past, his dreams over his comfort, himself over the noise of others. It was the hardest choice he had ever made, but it was also the best one. David was changing slowly but surely. He had let go of toxic friends. He was writing more. He was living with more peace. But there was still one problem. He wanted results too fast. Every time David looked at his book draft, he felt impatient. I should have finished this by now, he thought. When he looked at himself in the mirror, he thought, I should already be fit. When he thought about his career, he sighed. Why am I not successful yet? The impatience ate at him. Sometimes it made him want to quit. One afternoon, David met Sarah at a small bakery. She listened to his complaints, then smiled gently. David, she said, you're thinking in big leaps, but life is built in small steps. What do you mean? Think of it like this, she said. When you go to the gym once, nothing changes. When you write one page, it doesn't look like much. But if you do a little every day, the results add up. Small wins every day create big victories over time. That night, David thought about her words. He opened his laptop and looked at his draft. Only 20 pages. It felt so small. But then he asked himself, what if I wrote one page every day? In a year, I would have 365 pages. That's more than enough for a book. His heart felt lighter. The next morning, David started a new rule. One win every day. It didn't have to be big. It just had to move him forward. On Monday, he wrote one page. On Tuesday, he went for a 20-minute run. On Wednesday, he cooked a healthy dinner instead of ordering fast food. On Thursday, he read for 30 minutes instead of scrolling his phone. On Friday, he called his dad and had a real conversation. Each day, just one win. Small, simple, possible. At first, it felt too easy. But after a few weeks, he started to notice changes. His draft was growing. His body felt stronger. His mind was calmer. His relationships were warmer. The small wins were adding up. One evening, David told Tom about his new system. Tom grinned. That's it. People fail because they chase huge changes overnight. But real growth is built brick by brick. A little progress every day beats a burst of effort followed by burnout. David nodded. It made sense. Still, there were days when David didn't feel like doing anything. Some mornings he woke up tired. Some nights he wanted to just watch TV and forget about his goals. But then he remembered his rule, just one win today. Even on his worst days, he could do something small. Write 2 sentences, walk for 10 minutes, read 1 page. And every time, that small win gave him strength to keep going. A month later, David looked at his progress. His book had 50 pages. He could run longer without losing his breath. His room was clean most of the time. And most importantly, he felt proud of himself. Not because he was perfect, but because he was consistent. One Sunday, he visited Sarah again. She poured him tea and asked, "So how's the journey?" David smiled. "I think I get it now. Big goals used to scare me. But small wins? They're easy, and they build up." Sarah raised her cup. "Exactly. Success is not one big step. It's thousands of small ones." They clinked their cups together like a toast. That night, David wrote in his journal, "Small wins are the secret. 1 step today, 1 step tomorrow. And one day, I'll look back and see how far I've come." From that day on, he stopped worrying about someday. Instead, he focused on today. One small win at a time. And slowly, his life was transforming. Quietly, steadily, David was making progress. His book was growing, page by page. His body was stronger. His days were more focused. But soon, he discovered a deeper problem. Fear. It showed up in small ways. Every time he sat down to write, a voice whispered in his head, "What if nobody likes this?" When he thought about starting a new career, another voice said, "What if you fail?" When he looked in the mirror, he heard, "What if you're not good enough?" The fear was always there, waiting in the shadows. One evening, David told Sarah about it. "I'm scared," he admitted. "What if I try and it all goes wrong?" Sarah looked at him kindly. "David, fear never goes away. Everyone has it. The only difference between people who succeed and people who fail is this. Successful people act even when they're afraid." David frowned. "So you're saying I should just ignore it?" She shook her head. "Not ignore. Accept. Look fear in the eye and then move anyway." The next day, David met Tom in the park. "Tom," he said, "I feel like fear is chasing me everywhere. What do you do when you're afraid?" Tom smiled. "I do the thing anyway. Fear is like a bully. If you run, it grows stronger. But if you face it, it shrinks." He added, "Think of fear as a signal. It shows you where the important things are. If something scares you, it probably matters." David thought about that all night. The following week, he tested the idea. One of his colleagues at work asked, "Hey, David, would you like to give a short presentation next Friday?" Immediately, fear rose inside him. His heart raced. His hands sweated. His mind shouted, "Say no, you'll embarrass yourself." But then he remembered Tom's words. Fear shows you what matters. So he took a deep breath and said, "Yes." All week he prepared. His hands still shook every time he thought about it. The night before, he almost called to cancel. But when Friday came, he stood in front of the small group. His voice trembled at first. His slides were simple, but he spoke. And when it was over, people clapped. One colleague even said, "Great job, David. You explain it really clearly." David smiled. He had faced his fear and won. That night, he realized something important. The fear before an action is always bigger than the fear after. From then on, David began to look for chances to face fear. He signed up for a local open mic night, even though he was nervous. He shared the first chapter of his book with Anna and James, even though he feared they'd laugh. He tried running a longer distance with Lily, even though he thought he would fail. Each time, fear was there. But each time when he finished, he felt stronger. One evening, he wrote in his journal, "Fear is not my enemy. Fear is my compass. If I'm afraid, it means I'm growing." Of course, the fear never fully disappeared. Sometimes it still whispered, "You're not good enough." But David had learned the secret. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward in spite of fear. Weeks later, Sarah asked him, "So, David, how do you feel now when fear comes?" He smiled. "I still feel it, but now I see it as a sign. Fear means I'm on the right path." She nodded proudly. "Exactly." And that night, as David fell asleep, he whispered to himself, "I am not controlled by fear anymore. I walk with it, and I keep going." David had come a long way. He was no longer wasting his days on endless scrolling. He had let go of toxic friends. He was writing his book page by page. He had learned to face his fears. But he knew one more thing was needed: habits. One morning, David looked at his notebook. On the first page, he wrote, "Habits create the future." He realized that motivation comes and goes. Some days he felt strong. Other days he felt tired. But habits were different. Habits didn't depend on feelings. They were actions repeated until they became automatic. So David made a plan. He chose a few habits that matched his big rocks. Write 1 page every morning. Exercise at least 20 minutes a day. Eat healthy meals during the week. Spend time with family every Sunday. Simple, clear, realistic. At first, it was hard. Some mornings he wanted to stay in bed. Some nights he wanted junk food. But he reminded himself, habits are not built in a day. They are built by showing up again and again. And slowly, the habits started to stick. A few months later, David noticed something amazing. He no longer had to force himself to write. He just did it. He no longer had to push himself to exercise. It felt natural. He no longer had to plan family time. It was already part of his week. The habits had become part of who he was. One evening, David met Tom and Sarah at the cafe. They talked about life growth and dreams. Tom asked, "So, David, how do you feel now compared to a year ago?" David smiled. "I feel alive. I used to waste my life waiting for tomorrow. Now I live today. I choose my priorities. I avoid toxic people. I face my fears. And I build small habits every day." Sarah raised her cup of tea. "That's it, David. That's the secret. Life is not about waiting. It's about building step by step with purpose." That night, David walked home slowly, looking at the stars. He thought about the past, the wasted hours, the fear, the old friends who pulled him down. And then he thought about the future, the book he would finish, the health he would keep, the life he was building. For the first time, he felt truly at peace. Before going to bed, he opened his journal and wrote one final note. Don't waste your life. Don't wait for tomorrow. Choose the right people. Focus on what matters. Build habits that carry you forward. Lie with purpose today. He closed the notebook with a smile. The journey was not perfect. The journey was not easy, but it was real. And David finally knew he was no longer wasting his life. He was living it.